Welcome to the Primo's Musings podcast.
Good evening.
Doing good, Shri. How are you doing?
This is Shri here with Joshua. How are you doing, Joshua? All right. I think we're down to the final four of the college football playoffs, and we have Notre Dame and Penn State taking on the Orange Bowl on Thursday, and then we have the Ohio State and Texas on the Cotton Bowl. That's on Friday at 7:30 p.m. So let's quickly get down. I think the last time we talked was before the playoffs began. And I know we had made our predictions, and we're finally here to the Final Four. So wanted to hear your quick thoughts on what transpired over the last couple of weeks, and how
Yeah,
these
sounds
four
good.
teams got here. So I'm going to give you
Yeah,
the
yeah.
floor and
So last time we
let
spoke,
you talk about whatever you want to talk about.
I felt pretty good about every game, and then the Tennessee and Ohio State game came around, and I think that's the story of the playoffs. Is Ohio State uh, just rising from the ashes, coming back with a vengeance, and just really beating up on both Tennessee and Oregon last week in the Rose Bowl. They look unstoppable right now. They have three really solid receivers. Jeremiah Smith would probably be the first overall pick if he was able to come out right now, and he's still a true freshman, playing unbelievable ball. And Will Howard has really stepped it up too. So they're going to be a hard team to beat, and really think that they're the story of the playoffs. Outside of that game, honestly, I mean, I feel like every game. No, I shouldn't say every game because I think that the Notre Dame and Georgia game was probably viewed as a surprise to some people, even though they were the favorites going into that, them being Notre Dame. And I think a lot of people, with the exception of really the Notre Dame and Georgia game, and then the Arizona State and Texas game, people have been disappointed with some of the results in the playoffs. We're seeing
Mhm.
really all favorites win. I actually don't think that there's been a single upset so far, given that Notre Dame was favorites over Georgia, at
Mhm.
least by the time the game started. So this upcoming week with the semifinals. I really think this is probably what everyone's been waiting for, and the teams that didn't belong got filtered out, and now we have a final four of as you said, you have Penn State, Notre Dame, and then Texas and Ohio State. And I think you'd be hard pressed to argue that these are the four best teams in the country. So definitely got a couple of good games that are left to be played. Really excited to see how they play out. Um, but like I said, I think these are the best four teams that took care of business. Um, the other big game
Mhm.
was Texas and Arizona State, where looked like Texas was going to totally outclass Arizona State, and then Arizona State fought back. Cam Scatabo, really just an unbelievable performance, doing it all on the ground, even through the air. I think he caught a touchdown
Mhm.
too, just all over the place, and put a hard fought effort in, and ultimately when it came down to it, Quinn Ewers made the throw in 4th and 12 when he needed to, and ended up pulling that game out, and they're still fighting.
Yeah, well, the way I saw it was that, I mean, I know the earlier games were kind of a dud, like you said, and unfortunately, um, Tennessee and Oregon happened to be at the wrong end of the stick when it came to Ohio State. Ohio State definitely was really solid, and I think that means that Ryan Day keeps his job, even though he can still beat Michigan. But I still talk to Ohio State fans who still, if he doesn't win the national championship, he's out. So it's they're still bitter about that. So despite the fact they have probably put the two best performances that any team has done in the playoffs, and add to that they beat two very good teams, and after that they dominated the game. As far as the other three teams, I feel Notre Dame, they beat Indiana, they beat um, I would say Georgia didn't really have it. I mean, Gunnar Stockton actually played okay, but I think they didn't really have much going for them. To be honest with you, I mean Leonard. I mean, when I looked at the
Yeah.
stats, Leonard actually only threw for 90 yards for Notre Dame, and even when you think about the rushing, they didn't even get to like 150 yards combined. I mean, that's the entire team. Um, so, and then ATN was completely, limited for Georgia. So Georgia didn't really have a chance. Stockton actually played okay for someone who was,
Yeah, I think
backing
Notre
up.
Dame really played
But
that game
I
at a
don't think they had
tempo and in a way
answers.
that they really wanted to play. I mean, they made it a defensive game, um, kind of like a slow burning game that really came down to turnovers at unfortunate times for Georgia. ETN had a pretty crucial fumble on a long drive. And then they also got a special teams touchdown coming out of the half. And that was, I think, I mean, those two plays all really shaped the flow of that game. You
Correct.
also had the Georgia walk on that got hit by the ref and had it was called for a penalty that really killed some momentum too. The other thing that Georgia's had that's been a real issue, and I think every team could use extra receivers. I know Tennessee's in the same boat, and we actually lost a pretty big transfer to Georgia this past weekend in Zachariah Branch, but they've been plagued with drop issues all year. And the game was, I don't want to say out of reach. I think there was 6 or 7 minutes left. And Georgia had a deep ball that was dropped that would have possibly gone for a touchdown or at very least a 40-plus yard gain. And so, Georgia just didn't make the plays when they had to. Notre Dame did. And they're playing about as good as I mean, I can't say I'm surprised. I mean, like I said, they were favorites. By the time the game started, I actually switched my
Mm.
pick, which is obviously going with what Vegas said, which isn't the most bold take in the world, I guess. But Notre Dame's been playing great, and I feel like a lot of people that just watched
Hmm.
the beginning of the season, they saw them lose to NIU and they wrote them off, and they came back with a vengeance. And Marcus Freeman is really just got that team rolling. Um, he's done a really good job with them, and it's very impressive in the few years that he's done it.
He and he's been mentioned in even for NFL coaching, but I don't think he's going to be thinking about that at this point because I think his focus is going to be on Penn State. Um, Going back to the other two teams, um, I do think that the Texas Arizona State was a very close game, an OT game, but which I do think that there was a call in the game where Arizona State actually had. I thought it was a targeting penalty, but they didn't call it, and that would have really changed the game. But that was probably the best game. I would call it. I don't want to say the Elite Eight. I would say it's a quarterfinals because I'm so used to basketball. But I thought I
It
think Quinn
came out
Ewers
really
actually
strong.
played
Like,
okay
it was like
that
14
game.
points when
Actually,
you
he played
you, you
pretty
blink you
well.
blink and they're up
But
14.
they're up 14, yeah. And I think it's going to be interesting how this team will fare. And I think Edwards actually, I mean, he was what, 322 yards. So he did throw. Golden was just incredible. They couldn't stop Golden in that game, 7 for 149. So let's quickly get to what we're here to talk about. One was Ohio State and Texas, and then let's quickly get to the first game, which is the Notre Dame Penn State. How do you see this going, and what are the key things for both teams to do, both from an offense and defensive standpoint? I mean, because we both know that they probably have the best top five defenses with
Mhm.
Notre Dame. I think I was looking at a stat allows only about 13.8 games, 13.8 points a game, and then Penn
Wait, I'm,
State
I'm I'm sorry, I
15.8.
missed the
And
last
in
part.
college basketball, that's pretty incredible.
Oh yeah.
No, I said both teams have like top five defense with Notre Dame allowing 13.8 and Penn State allowing 15.8 points a game,
Oh yeah,
which
yeah,
in
yeah,
college
yeah.
basketball,
It's
such a low
both. I
number.
mean, on paper, defenses really stack up really well against each other. I'd probably give the edge to Penn State. I'm not sure if Abdul Carter is going to end up playing this game. I know he's one of the key.
There was a lot of questions on that. I did hear a lot. I mean, I think that's
Oh
someone I
yeah,
think as a Patriots fan
yeah.
is
Joe
targeting.
Joe Joe Milton
He
going in there and winning a
comes in the fourth pick.
winning a game that
Um,
I know you want to win every game, but that seemed like that was one that probably could have benefited from dropping. But
yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah. So where do you think this game is going in your mind? Who do you think is going to win this? I
okay,
think Notre Dame
yeah,
is like
I knew it was close to
one
a
and a half
toss
point
up. I
favorite, if
do
I'm not
like Penn
mistaken.
State in this game. They definitely cannot play the same way they came out in the second half against Boise State, which is I would say pretty lackadaisical, and they kind of took their foot off the gas. I just like Drew Aller as he's a I think he's their pass game is going to be tough to stop if they get rolling, and like I said, I think on defense you give the edge to or so it's pretty much a toss up for on defense, and then on offense got to give the edge I think to Penn State. Um, I want to say it's probably the closest line that we've seen so far going into a playoff game. So I'm going to go with Penn State, but I
Hmm.
definitely think it'll be a close game, and I think it'll be a pretty low scoring game. And I mean, it's definitely it sounds like it's coach talk probably, but when it comes to, I mean, it's going to come down to turnovers, I'm sure, just like how Georgia and Notre Dame did.
Hmm. Yeah, the way I see it is that, like I said, it's a toss-up game. I think one and a half points usually means nothing, especially in neutral field. The one thing that worries me from a Notre Dame standpoint, I'll get to Notre Dame, but Penn State, what they have, not only they have good defense, but their running game is probably they have the thunder and lightning kind of thing, right? With between Allen and Singleton, who've been very productive in the playoffs. With they've had like close to like between them they've close to almost like 400 yards in both the games. And I think even James Franklin did say that they are probably the some of the best that he in college football right now, and they both had 1,000 yard rushing. And one thing is that, like you mentioned about Allard, definitely great passing guy. But the other thing also is that they
Hmm.
have a very good tight end, and I was watching some of the highlights, Tyler Warren, and he averages about what 80 yards per game, which is pretty good. So, and he's also a very good threat of the running game. So it's almost that they have two good running backs, good passer, and then they could use a tight end who could also double up as a running backs from time to time. So he's so versatile. So that definitely going to be challenging for Notre Dame defense. And coming back to the quarterback, Drew Allardyce actually played much better. I was looking at some of his completion percentage. I was looking at some stats, and he has a 67% completion rate. So pretty much been very effective. He was very good against Boise State. Um, and again, we don't know what they're going to do, and that's the thing because they can pass, they can run, they can keep the versatility will definitely keep the defenses guessing,
Yeah,
and that's what I
I
see
I
them
would agree. Yeah, Tyler Warren's a
from that
matchup nightmare. I
standpoint.
mean,
Um,
I'm sure NFL scouts have got to be drooling over him with that. With his ability. I mean, he's pretty quick. He's huge. He can block.
mhm,
He can catch. He can do it all. Um, I don't know. You're kind of getting at it with. It just seems like there's Penn State has more ways that they can hurt you on offense. I feel like Notre Dame is a bit one dimensional, where if they can't run the ball, I think they're going to have a hard time scoring. And Georgia, I mean, like I said, they had a special teams touchdown. They had some turnovers. Georgia probably outplayed them, I would say, on offense. And they turned into a defensive battle. If Penn State's safe with the ball
mhm.
and I mean, I would say if they put up 20 points, they probably win this game. So, um, but yeah, I can see a lot going wrong still
Mm.
too. I mean, Notre Dame has been showing that they can force turnovers and make things happen when there's not much there. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, the one thing I do see, like from Notre Dame standpoint, like we just talked about, they only passed for 90 yards, and they really didn't rush for that many. They relied on a lot of the defense, and I think their defense is really good. They are ranked eighth in the country. But one thing that would be the key when it comes to it. Penn State has got all the, you can check off all the boxes when it comes to the passing and running. But one thing that I felt that just watching Notre Dame's game against Indiana as well as the last game that they played against Georgia, their defensive line is so good. Their pass rush is so good, and the it's going to come boil down to can Penn State offensive lines, kind of hold the Notre Dame pass rush, and if they can, I think they will succeed. But since you went Penn State, and I have a skin in the game with a with a college football pool I am in, I have to stay with Notre Dame because that would mean that I can win
I get it.
um, some cash in
I
that
feel pretty good about it
particular
at this
pool.
point
So
still.
I picked Notre Dame and Tennessee. I picked Notre Dame. Yeah. So I feel that Notre Dame's with their defense is going to win this game, but their offense is going to do bare minimum, and um, I think their not only their pass rush, their back end, their secondary is also pretty good. So I think, like you said, like Warren presents a unique challenge for them, but they they've been pretty solid, even like both on the pass rush as well as on the secondary. So that's where we are with that game. So you are going with Penn State, and I'm going to go with Notre Dame. Um, let's get to the next matchup, which is the Ohio State and Texas. This is, I think, at this point, Ohio State should be favored to win the national championship. I think they have the highest right now when it comes to that. So, um, interestingly, they are the sixth seed, and Texas is the three seed. We can
Bad.
get to the seedings from next year because I totally think as good as the playoffs were, I think reseeding should have been done because there's no way Ohio State would have played Oregon in that case. But anyway, they've been very impressive. They beat Oregon 41-21 in the Rose Bowl. Texas, like we talked about, escaped 39-31 in the overtime. So, what are the matchups you think are to watch? Because we definitely know about Ohio
Yeah,
State's
he's just
passing and their wide receiver Smith is so good. So I still
if it
think
was
he could
this
be the
year
number.
for
I think
sure. I
you're
don't know
right.
what the
I think he
quarterback
could be
class
the
is going to
number
look
one
like.
pick
That
or
seems to
number
be
two pick if he
driving
comes out.
most decisions in the NFL. For instance, I think Travis Hunter is probably the number one overall player, and you get a team like the Titans that are probably needs a quarterback. I don't know if Shador Sanders is a first round grade, but he'll probably go first. Him or Cam Ward. But yeah, that might be a stretch. But anyways, yeah, Ohio State, Texas, two teams that really feel like they're going in opposite directions right now. Ohio State's certainly on a roll. They're the hot pick. Texas seems to have some offensive issues, and they've gone a bit stagnant. And the line I think is I want to say it's Ohio State -6 right now, as a 6 point favorite. It may have moved since I last seen it, but or last saw it, but yeah, that's a big spread
6.5.
for a
I thought
team
I saw
like
six and a
Texas
half,
that
but you may be right. Yeah.
has the athletes to hang.
Hmm.
They are, I would say, probably the most physical defense that Ohio State has seen in the playoffs. I thought Tennessee was going to do a little bit more against them, but I think that Texas will be able to learn from the mistakes of Tennessee and Oregon and make this a bit closer. I don't know if I could pick against Ohio State with what I've seen in the last 2 weeks. Um, I might actually do it anyway because I think I picked Texas to begin
Hmm.
to win the national title, and I don't want to change that now. Um, I feel like this is like a type of game that whenever you have everyone picking one way and then you have another team just go in the exact opposite direction, something gives. And I feel like Texas may actually take it a step, it's like step it up a notch
Hmm.
and find a way to beat Ohio State. If not, I think that they would at least cover. It's probably a bold pick in the scene the way that they played over the last couple of days, but over the last couple of games. But I still think that Quinn Ewers he got it done when he needed to against Arizona State. He definitely that felt like a game where they lost focus. Maybe they were looking ahead, or I honestly I don't know what happened. Arizona State had some magic that they found in that game to come back, and I I think Texas has the athletes, and I don't know like if they're able to catch Will Howard on a bad passing day, or if they're able to scheme up and figure a way to limit Jeremiah Smith a bit, I could very easily see them having issues getting anything rolling, and at that point, it could be a toss up. So I'm gonna go with Texas. I don't feel great about it, and I wouldn't I wouldn't put real money on it to be honest. But I'm gonna go with Texas mainly because I picked them at the beginning because I thought they were the
Hmm.
best team, and you could argue that you've seen enough to change it, but they've been able to persevere through those droughts, and so I'm a rookie with them.
Hmm. I Yeah, the two things that I'll say, we both talked about this. Ohio State probably has the most potent offensive um, uh, team ever. I think they are the best. I mean, they've scored. They have Will Howard has been playing as good as can be from a quarterback standpoint, and then we talked about Smith, and they got Egbuka, who's also a very good receiver. So they have a very talented roster. I mean, Texas has got talent too, like we know about that. Um, the Ohio State also has like an excellent defense, and like you watched it against not just against Tennessee, but also against Oregon. I mean, they scored close to 80 points in both the games. Um, but there is one thing that, and I think Texas can compete with them. But the one thing that I was actually looking at this because the South is actually going through a freeze right now with the cold going
Yeah,
there. I
Jerry World.
think even though I think they're playing at the Arlington Stadium, which is this. So I don't know if it's a home game. It's almost like a home game for Texas, with Ohio State pretty much on the road. But having said that, the temperatures are going to be very low during the game because I think they said the temperature is supposed to be 38 degrees, and they're monitoring uh,
Is
the
that
weather
played? I thought it was played
for
in
the
the
game.
the
So
Cowboys.
that's interesting,
Are
I
they playing
think,
at the?
right? Oh, AT&T Stadium. Oh, no, they played at the
Okay,
AT&T Stadium. You're right. They are playing in Texas, though, in
got it. Okay.
Dallas, in Arlington, Texas.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, but
sorry,
University of
definitely will
Texas
be in
is in
Texas. Sorry,
Austin, so
I thought
it's
you were
still a
talking
home
about the
game. It's like a
temperature.
3 hour. No, no, no. Yeah, exactly. No, no, no. They're not playing. They're playing in the state of Texas, which is still a huge advantage for people traveling. The only thing would be if the weather plays spoil sport, will that be a bigger home court or home field advantage for Texas? I think that's going to be there. That's a key factor that we need to monitor. Again, Texas did play well. I mean, they beat Clemson. Um, but Texas has a very strong front against the run, so they can pressure the quarterback. So if there's anything that if Ohio State offensive line holds up against
Mm.
Texas defense, I think Texas is in there for a very long day. Again, they do a very good secondary, but they do have a very good edge rusher in Simmons. But it remains to be seen there. And again, for as far as Texas is concerned, um, they have to protect Quinn Evers. I mean, that's key because Ohio State's got excellent defense, and I think it's going to be very. And the one thing is that
Yep.
it's going to be a very interesting game for Texas. I think.
I think they're
Let's see if
getting.
Sarkisian can come up with a plan to stop Ohio State's explosive offense and then
Yeah.
maintain consistency throughout the game. And that's going to be the
Yeah,
key to the
I
game
think
here right now.
Texas is getting
So
Isaiah
you're
Bond
you're
back too because I
predicting
know he was out
Texas.
against Arizona
Um,
State.
okay, yep. I think that's a good one. And I know you're picking Texas too. And my heart says Texas, but I think Ohio State could win this game. But I'll stay with Ohio State. So I think it's going to be Ohio State
I'm picking Texas and
Notre
Penn
Dame
State, so we're
final,
going, but
and you're
we're
picking.
two totally different games.
Yeah, we're going the other way. Like I think yeah. So like I said, so what are the things like you think should be done? I mean, we were texting back and forth. last week, and
It'll
especially when it
yeah, as
comes to
of right
seeding, I
now,
believe
it's
is the
gonna stay
next
the
year going to
exact
be 12
same.
teams.
I believe that if there are any changes, they are still possible when it comes to reseeding, but it would have to be a unanimous vote across the board for the committee. And I would have a hard time thinking that representatives from like the ACC or the Big 12 that are going to be at a disadvantage when it comes to seeding typically are going to agree to doing to a change like that. At the same time, though, I mean, Arizona State, maybe Arizona State would have been the best example, but I mean, I want to say Boise State would have been pretty close to having a home game if they pulled just the top four teams. They still may have been on the
Hmm.
road. Not entirely sure, but yeah, it's a huge problem right now with college with the current system. Um, I mean, never mind like not wanting to have or like wanting to have an on campus game just for the fact that it's a huge revenue booster for your school, but outside of that, um, and if you just go purely off of if we
Hmm.
just look at the numbers here, and you saw this play out when with Georgia having to play Notre Dame and then Oregon having to play Ohio State. So what you typically see here is you'd have a one seed like Oregon in this case, where they have a 100% chance to advance from the first round because they have a bye.
Oregon.
And then that second game, and in this case, obviously Ohio State got hot and they won. But even if it wasn't a team that looks like 2019 LSU, like the best team that you've ever seen in your life, uh, it's still going to be a pretty close game. I mean, Vegas would probably have that line within
Hmm.
3 or 4 points, and you'd be looking at a 50-50 game, like ultimately a toss-up game. And that's what we saw there, where Ohio State was actually favorites. So
Hmm.
looking at that alone,
Hmm.
the chance to get to the semifinal round for a one seed, even in a normal year, would be give or take 50%. Then you have a team like Penn State or Texas. Both of those
Hmm.
games are 10 plus point spreads. And if you look at implied probabilities, you're looking at about an 80% chance on a 10-point spread to advance in that game. So when you have an 80% chance to win both those games, the chance to get to the semifinal round is give or
Hmm.
take 64%. So you're talking about just without even considering the quality of the team, just looking at the spreads in
Hmm.
a typical year, a 14% better chance to make it to the semifinals as a 5 or a 6 seed than if you were a 1 or a 2 seed. And you saw that play out in both games
Hmm.
where, and maybe this is a slightly odd year in the way this played out, but it really proved a point. The final four teams are the 5 seed, 6 seed, 7 seed, and 8 seed.
Hmm.
That's that's not right. Not that I mean Georgia. I mean teams like that they had a chance. They very easily could have won those games, and I think
Right.
it's partially a coincidence. But even on paper, it's still an advantage to be a 5 or a 6 seed
Hmm.
over a one seed. I mean, and that just totally degrades the importance of conference championship games, and you
Yeah.
get that rest versus rust debate as well. And it seems like usually the rust ends up showing out more than the rest.
Yeah. And I think they could definitely learn from NBA or somebody that does the reseeding thing pretty well. Um, and I think in that case, Oregon would have never played Ohio State. That in by that logic, right? So I think there's a lot of. I mean, I'll give credit where it's due. They wanted to have a playoffs. They had the playoffs, although the first round matchups didn't turn out to be as good as they expected. Um, I still think that um, the Texas Arizona State game was phenomenal. The Notre Dame Georgia game was good, and except that Notre Dame scored 17 points in 54 seconds, and that pretty much changed the complexion of the game. And like you mentioned, they were driving, they were driving to score a touchdown in Georgia, and then they
Yeah.
fumbled the
ETN
ball,
had no
and that pretty
chance of that
much,
one too. I mean, that
they
was
would have
another
actually gone up
another
seven
instance of
three
Notre
at that
Dame's
point.
line
They
just
scored.
blowing that play up. That was about as surprising of a mismatch as I've seen in a long time with Notre Dame's defensive line dominating uh, high level SEC team. That the SEC as a whole, as a Tennessee fan, there are some fans that will root for their conference. I am not one of those fans. I will root against every other SEC team in every game, regardless. It doesn't matter who it is, and I don't have that hatred for Texas and Oklahoma quite yet. It'll get there. I know it will. But I mean, when you have Georgia, when you have Alabama, Ole Miss, when you have all these guys playing, I'm gonna root against them every time. And SEC is taking a pretty big black eye in this tournament for sure. And even in the
Mm,
bowl games where some of them may not matter, but you have Alabama losing to a Michigan team that I can't call them dead this year after beating Ohio State, but um, in a terrible year, and Alabama was the pretty big favorite in that game, and they end up dropping that. South Carolina losing to Illinois. Ole Miss was the only one that actually showed up, and I feel validated on that one too, where you have all three of those teams. I thought Ole Miss was the one that deserved to go past, and granted,
mhm.
Michigan is probably a tougher matchup than Duke, but I mean, it's Alabama wasn't even close in that game. Um, so
Right, right. Yeah. No, I am I typically don't root for my own whether it's in the conference when it comes to it. Um, but I think when it comes to the NFL, I'm going to make a special exception here in the NFL, where I'm going to root for Buffalo Bills. I really like Josh Allen, and I really think
they're
that
too likable.
I want to see a
They're too
new
Josh Allen
team
is
win
way
the
too
Super
likable,
Bowl.
and
So I'm actually
it begs the question. It's a hypothetical that I don't know if I'm sure you've heard it at some point. But it's similar to what the Bills went through in the '90s. So you, as a Patriots fan, have experienced the exact opposite of basically winning every other Super Bowl over the past 20 years. Would you rather win one Super Bowl? I'll go for like next year. So one Super Bowl in 2025, 2026 season, and then not make the playoffs for 20 straight years and just be
root.
similar to how they were in this past year? Or would you rather make it to the Super Bowl
Mhm.
for 20 straight years and then lose every single one of them? You only get one of those two. You only get this two.
I'll give you a third option, which is what I was telling somebody. I only get two. Um, I would take the Super Bowl because that would mean that the Patriots would have more Super Bowls than San Francisco and the Steelers. I would take that, and that would be a good bragging thing because that would put us at seven, while San Francisco and Steelers have six each. So now San Francisco cannot win the Super Bowl this year. I don't think the Steelers are going to win the Super Bowl this year with the way they're playing. They lost
Yo,
four
here.
straight, and I don't think they're going to win. Now, my third option was, I mean, as a Patriots fan, I'm actually going to root for the Bills. I mean, I want them to win because I think they've suffered enough. And I think Josh Allen is such a likable guy, just like even Joe Burrow for me. I know he's an LSU guy, but I think in fact, I feel bad that the Patriots beat the Bengals and that prevented the Bengals from making the playoffs. Not that it was game one of the season, but still, that would have been a good thing for the Bengals to win and make the playoffs. The third option I was going to give you was that because the Patriots have six Super Bowls, and I think I was telling somebody, like a Browns fan or somebody at work today, and he said, "I have no sympathy for you. I mean, you're fine being at the bottom of the barrel." But I said, "You know what? I don't want a Super Bowl at this point. I want a team that can compete year in and year out. And even if they lose in the divisional round or if they lose in this one, I think it'll be very tough for me to take it. But at least if they put a very competitive product on the field, and anyone who's gone to a Patriots game this year have told me that the air has been sucked out of the stadium right now, and this is not something that we're used to. Having gone to almost like a lot of games in the Brady era, and it's just not you're not used to it. And I mean even to this day, like if you're a Cowboy fan right now, I mean they're still packing the stadium right now. They're still putting a good pro. I mean, let's see whatever happens. I mean, they were 13-3. A couple of years, 2 years ago, they won the division. The
if you
only
sign
thing
it,
is like they
if you
cannot
sign a
take that next
quarterback
step
for $50 million
because they have
and
been
he's
on the
not the
high.
top five player
They
in the
cannot take
league,
that.
like you're gonna really strap yourself. And Brady always seemed to be. I don't know what his actual salary was year to year.
And Mahomes too. And Mahomes too. I think I give credit to Mahomes as well. I mean, as much as I'm not a big fan of Kansas City, I you have to respect how they do things there. I mean, um, Andy Reid has got this team playing at such a high level, and Mahomes is a person that you
So I've,
cannot. I mean, you
sorry,
could be
finish,
down
finish your
20
thought. Finish your thought. I didn't
points,
mean to cut you off.
he will bring them back. And I think, yeah, go ahead. No, one thing is that I was listening to Teddy Bruschi on NFL the other day, and they were asking about how would Kansas City do against Denver, and he basically said, "Oh, they're going to lose this game." And he said the one guy who changes everything for them is Patrick Mahomes, and I totally believe that. And he basically said they have no shot winning that game against Denver. I mean, I know they wanted to tank that game because they want to rest their starters and things like that, but that's fine. But you put anybody else at quarterback
The
at Kansas
the gap
City,
between Carson
they're
Wentz
not
and
winning
Patrick
those
Mahomes
games.
is
Mahomes just
about as
makes
big of
it
a hypothetical
possible.
gap as you could possibly have, and from a talent perspective. I did want to ask you two questions. So, on the same lines of the Chiefs kind of throwing that game, which no one can blame them. I mean, they already have the one seed locked up. Um, First off, do you think that the Chiefs have been sandbagging for most
Hmm.
of this year? Where they're the only team that had the only winning team that hasn't put up 30 points in a game this whole year. The other teams, I think, were the Giants, the Raiders, and I want to say the Patriots. Sorry about that. Yeah, that was so just. I mean, there's bottom dweller
Patriots.
teams, and then then you have a team like Chiefs that it seems that they're not ramping it up, and they're going to just flip that switch in the playoffs.
I Which they've done in the past. I mean, the year that their defense didn't play that well, and magically their defense played well. Even last year against the Ravens and the Bills, the Ravens had all the high-powered offense going in, and they couldn't score anything. And of course, they made a lot of mistakes, but Chiefs defense came up. So to answer your question, I don't think they were, and this is something that happens in every championship caliber team, which is they try to figure themselves out. And earlier in the games, they managed to win. And this is exactly how, I mean, I just watching the Chiefs reminds me so much of the early years of the Patriots years, where you would think that the Patriots would be in this dogfight, 17 all, 2 minutes to go. Brady would drive, they would kick a field goal, and they would win it. And then, and you would think, okay, they can't score. And then the next thing you know, they'll play amazing defense and then they will win the Super Bowl. And I think the Chiefs are almost like very, very similar. It almost like I'm seeing like a repeat of, except that obviously Mahomes is much more, dynamic quarterback, versatile quarterback than Brady. Brady's a pure pocket passer. Um, but I don't think they're sandbagging. I think they let whatever. So in each game, when you look at it against Denver, it was the special teams that blocked the field goal and they won it. I mean, they should have lost the game against the Raiders, against Cincinnati. Again, there was a 4th and 16 play. They got a call, but initially I thought they got benefited of a call, but I think when you
Yeah.
watched it
Oh,
again,
is it I think
yep,
that was is
definitely
it the
the guy
Falcons
was
game?
mugging him, and there was no reason to mug the receiver, and then they got a penalty. The Falcons game too, and there was also another game against the Cincinnati Bengals that they had a 4th and 16 call, and so they were lucky with some of the calls. I mean, there was a Raider game, which the Raiders mishandled the snap, Chiefs recover, there was a penalty. The referees said the game is over. So they were lucky with some of those things, uh, and I do think that luck definitely you know played a big role in a couple of their wins. But I
Yeah.
don't think they were sandbagging. It's just that they can't. They were trying to figure themselves out. But now they're going to go in probably the most healthiest team going into the playoffs. They're going to have. I mean, they didn't play many of their starters yesterday. Then they're
Yeah.
out next week. They have a bye. So they don't play for like almost 2.5 weeks, 2 weeks. So 3 weeks almost. Mahomes hasn't played for 3 weeks. So he's definitely going to be well rested. I don't give much for his ankle and high ankle sprain and things like that. I think he dodged a bullet. But I know Kelsey, everybody says he's washed up, but he'll make those great plays. They got Hollywood Brown. They got Pacheco's there. So and the defense is as good. I mean, they have Chris Jones who's been hurt, but they always Steve Spagnuolo will come up with a plan. And the Steve Spagnuolo is someone who has not only coached the two giant teams against the Patriots. He's coached the last two Super Bowls for Kansas City. So, and Andy Reid is as great as the offensive genius, and they will come up with some plays that you'll see. And I think that's one thing. And I know, going to the NFL, I think I would say the Chargers playing the Texans. The Chargers could give a run for Chiefs money in the divisional round. I think that's going to be an interesting. If they get through the Charger game, I don't know if. I mean, I think
Yeah.
Buffalo
It seems that they have a
can beat
little
them,
extra
but I
in the
think
tank that
Buffalo and
they've been
Ravens are going to
saving, whether
play if
that's the
they
play calling
get through the
or,
first round. So
as you mentioned, I mean, I definitely do think there's some luck involved. But either way, I mean, worst case scenario, you're still talking about a 13-3 team. So yeah, I mean, I want to be bold with my picks on who's going to win the Super Bowl, and I feel like if you don't, I can't. You can't not. I feel like you can't pick against the Chiefs right now.
sure.
I mean, are they your Super Bowl pick? Because I feel like you got to be like almost ignoring the last 2 years if you don't pick them.
I was being texting, in my friends chat or things like that. I think that's going to be my Super Bowl pick. I think it's going to be
Yeah,
the Chiefs versus the Lions. That's my pick. While I want the Lions to win, I don't know. The Lions' defense yesterday was pretty good against Minnesota, except that Sam Darnold kept missing his receivers, which was crazy to watch.
yeah,
So
Chiefs and yeah.
you know
I could see the
that would be my
Vikings
pick
making a run
for the Super
too,
Bowl.
or the Packers. I mean that the NFC North this year was unreal.
I think the Vikings are good. Yeah, I mean, again, that's another team, right? The Vikings or the Bills. I
Yeah,
mean, I would want the Bills and Detroit Super Bowl or Bills and Vikings Super Bowl, only because the Vikings haven't
yeah.
won a Super Bowl.
I will
the
say
the
this too
Lions
with
haven't
the
won,
NFL. I
and the
think
Bills
that
haven't won.
there's
So I think
definitely
it'll be
been a
good to see
narrative
that.
that there's a lot of top heavy teams and a lot of just really bad teams this year. And if you look at the standings, I mean, you'll see there's a lot of teams that are, I think, greater than 11 wins. And there's a lot of teams that have less than like 5 or 6 wins. And I think toward the end of the year there's a
Mhm.
lot of pretty bad games, so at least on paper. Um, but now going into the playoffs, where you filter all those bad teams
Mhm.
out, and you're only having these great teams play against each other, there's probably more teams I would say that are like. Would it shock you if the Ravens, if the Chiefs, Bills, Lions, Vikings, Packers, any of those teams, like would any of those surprise you if they won the Super Bowl?
Packers, maybe. I mean, I would say if you ask me to put the odds right now, I would put the Chiefs, Bills. Oh no, Chiefs, Lions,
Yeah.
Bills, Vikings. Right, those would be my four. If you ask me right now, and maybe the Eagles. I mean, I'm sorry. I mean, I'd be upsetting my Eagle
Yeah.
faithful if I didn't pick the Eagles too. So that's where we are. So I think, I mean, I'm still going to stay with the Chiefs. I mean, that's my prediction. I think they get to the first three-peat. That's
I wanted to
incredible
ask
in the
my
South.
last hypothetical too with
As
the
much as it
Chiefs.
pains me to say that, I think they are going to win.
If the Bengals and the Broncos flipped and
Sure.
the Chiefs had the chance to keep the Bengals out of the playoffs by beating them last week, do you think that they play their starters or do you think they rest them still to keep Burrow and the Bengals
Oh,
out? So you think they go?
you mean
Okay.
like, to keep the
So
Bengals out?
I've heard people saying like, oh,
Oh,
are they going to play their starters
absolutely.
against the Broncos? And
Absolutely.
like that's I feel like that would be different than if they
Absolutely.
were playing directly against them. Is that
No, no, because I don't think they would rather. I mean, even the Broncos are a tough team to play for the Chiefs or any of the teams, because right now the Chiefs know that if the Chargers, because the Chargers are already won, so the Chargers going to the Texans, and I predict the Chargers beating the Texans. I mean, I would be shocked if the Chargers don't beat the Texans, and then the Chargers would have to go to, because I don't see the Steelers beating the Ravens. So, which means that the Chargers would have to go there to the Chiefs, and Buffalo would be playing. Buffalo, I think, will be playing the Ravens, 2 and 3, and then the least favorite would be like Chargers going to the Chiefs. The Chiefs would be worried about Chargers, but I do think that the Chiefs would have been worried if Cincinnati got in as a 7th seed. That I mean, I don't know if they can beat Buffalo again.
mm,
But I think they didn't want to take any chance. I would say they just wanted Cincinnati out
okay?
of the playoffs. So I think that's why they didn't play the Stars. I mean, they were fine losing that game, and they were fine
Yeah,
not having
yeah.
Mahomes, getting
I
injured
don't.
or
I mean,
something, or
obviously,
any
that's
of their
it's the
starters
norm
getting
now
injured.
with the
They're
NFL,
healthy
where if
right
there's
now.
not really much to gain in that last game, there's you just don't play your starters. And I know the NFL is different from college football, but I think it's what's going on now with the amount of rest that teams get.
Mhm.
I feel like, and I think part of it too is just the fact that they're like the PTs that they have now and the athletic training, like it's so good that their recovery is so good that I think I think that the rest hurts them more in a sense that they just come out and they get rusty. Um,
I hope
it
so,
probably
but
won't
but I
matter.
don't know if
It
it's going to
probably won't
happen
matter.
because they got probably one of the greatest quarterbacks to play, and then it wouldn't matter. I mean, I know like in the past, like Patriots should have rested Wes Welker, and they did not rest him. They were playing Houston on a meaningless game where it didn't matter. Non-football injury, he was out, and that really put them. They didn't win the Super Bowl that year. So I and then they had. I, I think a lot of these things happen, and then Belichick has this way of making sure his players play. Like he put Gronk in one of the special teams thing. He got hurt.
Yeah.
That hurt his chances in the Super
Even if
Bowl
it's just
against the
not like
Giants.
maybe to rest the quarterback.
So
I don't. I just
I don't
it
know.
makes me nervous
Sometimes,
now with
and
seeing
then
teams and they just like when they bench everyone like going there's 2 or 3 weeks without just any sort of contact like that. I mean, maybe in other sports is a bit different, but I mean with football, like I gotta imagine that if you probably have to get your bell rung a couple times for you to snap back into it after sitting for a bit. Um, the last thing I wanted to ask too is your MVP
hmm,
pick.
this is something that my kids and I were talking about it over the weekend. um, Burrows had probably had one of the best, um, thing you can ever have. Him and Jamar Chase, won the Triple Crown, I think. Um, but to me, I was going to lean Josh Allen. One of my sons said Lamar.
I think
Um,
I think
who do you think
Lamar should win it.
should
I do
be?
think
I
that
think it
there is
should be
some
Josh.
fatigue with him winning MVP, and I think that Josh Allen will get it. Um, I do think you're it's splitting
Could
hairs a
be.
bit when it comes to comparing the stats with them. Um, I think Josh Allen has been unreal this year. I
Hmm.
There's so many good picks. I mean, I really think there's a good argument. There's an argument for Saquon too, um, to be able to
Yep.
do that as a running back. And I mean, if he has even half the touchdowns that were taken away from him at the goal line this year, he's probably running away with the MVP. Uh, so I mean,
Hmm.
MVP to an extent too is also
Right.
I mean, as the name suggests, it's overall value, and so if you take Saquon out of the Eagles offense, they're not obviously not as good, but clearly if you take Josh Allen out of the Bills offense or Lamar out of the Ravens
Hmm.
offense, they look like a completely different team. So I don't know. I probably lean Lamar.
Well, yeah. Well, I agree with you in one sense that, I mean, Lamar did have, Derrick Henry this year. But, Josh Allen, he's almost seems like a Superman. He didn't have Stephon Diggs, but, he does it with a bunch of, receivers and, he's got some decent receivers, but I don't think they're like Jamar Chase kind of receivers. I mean, Patrick Kelsey, uh,
Yeah.
Lamar had Henry, so Josh does everything. Like, he's the number of touchdowns he rushes. And I think Lamar had less rushing touchdown this year than Josh. But I think Lamar I think I saw a stat, like, I think first quarterback to throw for 4,000 yards and rush for 800 yards. It's just incredible.
That's a
800
solid
yards
season.
for a
That's a really
running
solid. I mean,
back
that's like
would
that's
be
a
a
real that's
decent,
like the
that's
best
like a
number two
decent
running
win.
back numbers that you could probably put up. So you're doing that
That's
as a
a solid
quarterback.
season. Yeah.
It's special. That is a good point though with Josh Allen and the help that he's had. I mean, Khalil Shakir is definitely not
Yep.
the wide receiver or go to target that you have even with Zay Flowers. Um, so he's definitely putting up crazy numbers. It's going to be a good playoffs.
Hmm.
I'm probably more excited going into these playoffs than I have in the past, where it kind of feels like there's clear favorites. Um, this one, I mean, I could, like I said, there easily could be 5 or 6 teams that I could say wouldn't surprise me
Yeah.
if they won it all. Um, Michael Penix too. I what he, he's yeah
Yep. I think you got a good quarterback. You just need
yeah
a. I mean, you had the chance to win this division. You had the chance. I think you guys had started Michael Penix Jr.
yeah.
when
If money
Falcons were
wasn't a
going on the
factor, they
slide. I
probably would have made
think
the move a little bit
even one or
sooner.
two
But they
games could
wanted to
have
make sure
swung
they
that.
didn't
I
lose
think.
out on their investment before they knew for sure that he wasn't gonna be the guy anymore. But yeah, I think Pro Football Focus had him as like one of the it was like the top 4 or 5 quarterback performance this year. And I know it was the Panthers, so I don't know how much you'd count it, but
Yeah.
he's he's a stud. Right.
Hmm. No, Panthers have been playing well. I mean, Panthers almost, they held the Chiefs again. That was another game. The Panthers almost came very close to beating the Chiefs. So the Panthers have been playing well. I mean, see, those are the kind of things I would like to see in the whole reason why Mayo. You want to see improvement, even though you didn't make the playoffs. You want to see that improvement, and I don't think the the Patriots saw that. Like, even when
Yeah.
you look at what the Panthers finished 5-12, but they were in most of the games. And if you're a Panthers fan, and then the way the Bryce Young has bounced back, um, he was benched, then went to Andy Dalton. They came back to Bryce Young. Uh, they played well. I mean, they fought well throughout the season. So, uh, you can't fault them for not trying. I mean, same thing with the Bears. I mean, Caleb Williams actually has a
Oh,
better
I think
stat
it's the same. And you take
than
away the
C.J.
rushing
Stroud
stats, but
this
I think
year.
it's the same with Jade.
I couldn't believe that.
No, with Jaden with Daniels. I mean, yeah, it's
Rushing stats. Yeah, yeah,
you,
exactly.
you are
Yeah.
playing a
So,
dangerous game from my opinion, from
yeah.
my perspective when it comes to changing coaches because the Bears have done this the last 2 quarterbacks with Fields and now with Caleb Williams where you start firing head coaches after a year of development and it seems to throw them off. But I mean, you're
Mhm.
a lot closer to following like the day to day with the Patriots compared to me. So if they're not putting up a fight, I mean, I do think that is a fair argument.
Mhm.
I don't know why they hired him in the first place. If they were just going to fire him after a bad year, like I don't know what they were expecting this year.
I think Kraft just came out and said he put him in a bad spot, and I think it was all on Kraft. But when I look at, like, we were talking about the Panthers, like when I look at teams that are 5-12, when you look at the Jets 5-12 and the Panthers 5-12,
Oh
the
yeah,
Panthers 5-12 looked a much better season than the Jets 5-12. That's what I was saying. Um, and the Patriots 4-13, the Raiders 4-13, Jaguars 4-13, Titans 3-14. No wonder they're the top four picks. and the Giants too, right? But when you look at it, and that's where you see it,
Oh
right? I
yeah,
mean, when you
yeah.
see the 5
From
and 12
an
teams,
expectations
I would rather
perspective,
take
like
the Panthers 5 and
yeah,
12 than the Jets 5 and 12 at this point. Exactly, exactly. And not only the expectation, but the way they played. Like the Bears 5 and 12 was, that happened to be one of the wins for the Patriots, but the Bears 5 and 12 was actually not that bad. I mean, they played pretty well. They won the last game. I mean, of course, Packers, rested everybody, but Caleb Williams actually played well. But give Caleb Williams a good coach, give him a good defense. I think they have good skill players. A good coach for Caleb Williams, I can definitely see him changing the tide in Chicago right now. So, and I don't know if the Vikings will be able to do the
yeah.
same thing what they did this year again, but remains to be seen. But so, Josh, this was fun. I'm sure that we'll
Oh,
do another
I've
one
fully moved on to
with
basketball
more
season.
sports coming in.
I'm
Basketball
psyched
is
about
coming
my
in. We'll do
both
more
basketball.
there. But this, oh, me too. I was watching. UConn had a big win yesterday against Providence. They were down by 12 points, came back and won it. Again, we are without our one of their top players, McNeely, but I got to tell you that they really impressed me with the defense. They I think they had a 29-5 run or something like that. And if Dan Hurley can turn that defense around,
Yep.
watch out, Big East. I don't know about winning the national championship at this point. I'm not even thinking. I just want. I think
Yeah,
they have tough
we'll need
games
to do
coming up right
we'll need to
now
do an
against
in-depth
Villanova and Georgetown. Two
college
road games,
basketball
so it's going to be
preview
a
at
tough
some
game.
point because yeah, that's
But
I feel like there's like 2
we'll do that.
months
Yeah,
of cupcake games. At least with the SEC, I mean, there's you out of all the out of conference are just a bunch of nobody teams,
yeah.
and so it
We,
finally
we,
feels like basketball season starting, and it came at a perfect time after Tennessee let me down in football. So ready to bounce back, #1 team for a little bit.
eh, well, it's good. You're gonna have your Tennessee right now. You still have Tennessee at
Yeah,
14 and
it's a
0,
March
so I
4th
think
that
it's still.
you can't peak too early.
It's still good. Undefeated team still, right? So I don't know how many. Yeah, well, that's okay. You just have to win games. That's all that matters. The whole point is to get into the big dance and then figure it out. Like right now, I feel that UConn's doing that. They won 8 in a row. So they started hot. They lost three in Maui, and ever since they came, they've not lost. But they do have some tough games coming up right now. They do play at Villanova and they play at Georgetown, which are right now, when I look at it, um, they are 10-5. Villanova is 10-5.
Good,
Georgetown is 12 and
good
2. So
test.
we have and they're all on winning streaks right now. So it's going to be tough. It's going to be, especially without McNeely. Without McNeely,
Yeah,
let's see if this team
take
can
your wins
bounce
when you can get
back.
them.
But
All right, well, thanks,
I
Ray.
predict 1-1 here on the road trip. So we'll see.
Thank you for listening. Primo will be back soon.